The Washington Commanders should absolutely consider signing either Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson when the new league year begins next week. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. And from there, you will get one-on-one conversations with me, news analysis, bonus content, all kinds of cool stuff, including live text coming up from practices, games, training camp, draft weekend. I'll be at the Commanders facility doing all that stuff. Pro days, already starting to look in the pro day schedules, all kinds of great stuff coming up here in the NFL schedule. So get all that directly delivered directly to your phone and then interact with me directly one-on-one. Again, Locked On Commanders insiders, go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders and text me today. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, I greatly appreciate your continued support for the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet, winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. On today's episode, we are going to do mock draft Tuesday. We had Logan Paulson on for Monday, didn't want to delay that, so we put that out on Monday. We are going to do our mock draft Monday, just a day later now, so mock draft Tuesday, following the NFL Scouting Combine. I just got back from Indianapolis today, and we're going to talk about why Washington should and will absolutely consider signing either Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson this offseason. But first, we got to talk about kind of what leads into this whole thing, because yes, the Washington Commanders should absolutely consider signing one of those free agent veterans to be. And that, of course, is assuming that Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings don't get a deal done before the new league year begins next week. So bottom line is, guys, whether everybody likes it or not, Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins are going to be considered by the Washington Commanders. They're going to consider literally every option they have at quarterback and across the roster. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. And on Monday, there was a lot of big news happening around the National Football League, and it all kind of kicked off with Bucs wide receiver Mike Evans getting his deal done with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he will be remaining with the organization that drafted him. Pretty much the outcome that we kind of all expected. We talked a little bit about Mike Evans here on the program, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of did that early. I kind of did that very quickly. We kind of wanted to get Mike Evans conversations in there because I kind of felt like the Buccaneers weren't going to mess that up and let him get out of the building. But because it was a potential possibility, and his agent was certainly putting out some words on the wind, that perhaps it was going to happen. Definitely something worth talking about. But wide receiver Mike Evans off the market, will be back in Tampa Bay for his 11th season next year in 2024. Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson, however, is not going to be back in Denver with that organization. Not only was it reported that he has been told he will be released on the day of the new league year beginning, but the Denver Broncos straight up put out a statement about it. GM George Patton and head coach Sean Payton putting out a joint statement saying, quote, "We spoke with Russell Wilson today to inform him of his release after the start of the league year. On behalf of the Broncos, we thank Russell for his contributions and dedication to our team and community while wishing him the best as he continues his career. As we move forward, we are focused on building the strongest team possible for the 2024 season and beyond. We're excited to improve this offseason and we'll have the flexibility to get better through the draft and free agency," end quote. So the Denver Broncos straight up putting out a statement saying that they're going to be releasing a guy. Typically, they wait until they actually release the guy, but this is not news necessarily from an unexpected standpoint. It's something that we all kind of knew was coming, understood was coming, but officially being official now and releasing Russell Wilson at the start of the new year or shortly after the start of the new league year allows the Broncos to designate him a post-June 1st cut, which we will discuss later on here in the episode. So if you're confused at all about what a post-June 1st cut means, stick around because we will talk about that. But the bottom line is Russell Wilson at the beginning of the new league year, and to be quite honest with you, already has started and will continue to continue his search for a new team. That is already being put out there. And yes, technically, if a team were to negotiate contracts and all that stuff with him right now, it could be considered tampering, but it's kind of one of those things where it's not a crime unless it's reported type of situation. So Brandon Marshall, former Denver Broncos wide receiver, former NFL receiver, just in general, discussed with Russell Wilson recently on the I Am Athlete podcast a list of teams who have the best chances of landing Russell Wilson, and the Washington Commanders came in 6th on that list. So according to the list that Brandon Marshall had on his podcast, the first team, top team with the chance of getting Russell Wilson, the Pittsburgh Steelers, followed by the Atlanta Falcons, New England Patriots, Las Vegas Raiders, Minnesota Vikings, and then coming in 6th place, the Washington Commanders. Now, the Minnesota Vikings are a little bit interesting there because, of course, Kirk Cousins is the other quarterback that we're going to discuss today, and certainly a quarterback that they're very familiar with. So if they don't retain Kirk Cousins, apparently this list that Brandon Marshall puts out thinks that they're going to pursue Russell Wilson. So to those who, first off, so Washington comes in 6th, and before we dive into that too much deeper, for anybody who says the Washington Commanders, no way, no chance, they want an older quarterback whose best days are behind him, all that stuff, I'm going to remind you that everybody also said that the team didn't want an older retread coach either. Yet Dan Campbell is here. So that on top of who says Russell Wilson's best days are behind him. Certainly he's older and certainly hasn't looked, the let Russ cook and all that stuff version of himself here lately, but he hasn't been terrible, guys. Russell Wilson in 2023 had the 3rd best completion percentage of his entire career. He had his 9th NFL season with at least a 5.8% touchdown rate, which was 3rd highest in 2023, 5.8%. 3rd highest in 2023. His 6th NFL season with a sub 2% interception rate, and his interception rate in 2023 tied for 10th in the NFL. So he's top 10 in interception rate, which is good, like lower numbers. Top 3 in touchdown percentage. He had his 8th best passer rate. He had the 8th best passer rate, in 2023 in the entire NFL. And he was also sacked 45 times, but he's been sacked at least 33 times every year he's been in the league. So that's not new. Like Russell Wilson taking sacks and getting sacked is not necessarily new. It's just something that a lot of people are starting to point out. Again, the floor for Russell Wilson is 33 times. This year alone, 33 sacks would have been top half of the league. So Russell Wilson is a quarterback who gets sacked quite a bit. So here's the bottom line. Russell Wilson, far from perfect in 2023, far from perfect in 2022, but he wasn't bad. Was he bad at times? Absolutely. Who isn't? But the biggest story here is that he and Sean Payton, he and Nathaniel Hackett, they were not good fits. They just were not good fits. What makes Dan Quinn and Russell Wilson a good fit? Well, for starters, they both worked for the Seattle Seahawks in 2013 and 2014. Those 2 seasons happened to be when Seattle went to the Super Bowl. They won one, they lost one. So Dan Quinn certainly has a connection there. He also has a connection with Pete Carroll, who Quinn and Wilson both worked for. So who better to talk to Coach Quinn about what he doesn't already know about Russell Wilson than Coach Carroll? So Coach Carroll gives Coach Quinn a nice, reaffirming notion that Russell Wilson is still a good dude to work for. Who says that it can't happen? And oh, by the way, the Russell Wilson homecoming story, it's a story that writes its own PR copy. So that's too easy. Then you look at the team, right? The Broncos defense last year, 27th in scoring. The Commanders, 32nd. So Denver was better, but let's not pretend they were great, right? They were still pretty bad. Offensively, the Broncos wide receiver 1, supposed to be Jerry Jeudy. Turns out it was actually Cortland Sutton, and now Broncos fans want Jerry Jeudy to be traded. So who knows, maybe Denver will trade him, and maybe they'll trade Cortland Sutton to the Washington Commanders if they sign Russell Wilson. His best tight end, Adam Troutman. Running back number 1, Javonte Williams, who's solid, but he had fewer yards rushing last year than Brian Robinson Jr. did, yet he had a game's worth of carries more than B-Rob. He also had fewer receiving yards than Brian Robinson and 11 more catches. So if you put Russell Wilson on a better group or with a better group of offensive weapons, Denver's offensive line wasn't all that great either. So that's kind of a push, at least a similar type of defense and a coach who reminds them of better days. That's a recipe for some potential, at least, to see the old Russell Wilson. And like we've discussed, it gives Washington multiple bites at the quarterback apple, because just because you sign a veteran this offseason does not mean you can't go after a young quarterback to develop, along with a young quarterback in Sam Howell to continue developing as well. But of course, Russell Wilson is not the only veteran that the Commanders could potentially go after. Kirk Cousins has some Washington-colored smoke billowing around him as well. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Perhaps you'd go for a run. Maybe you take a nap. Maybe you read a good book. Maybe show up for a friend in need. Maybe you rewatch your favorite game from the 2023 NFL season. A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. But the question would be, what is that time for? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? Well, the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and how to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Continuing on now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day. Every day, make sure you come back tomorrow. We're breaking down the combine. We're going to talk about our standout players from each day of the drills, and we're going to basically flesh out our spring scouting series that we will be hitting later on this offseason. So insiders, get ready for some bonus episodes coming, some bonus film study content. If you're not an insider and you want to get in on that, sign up today. Just go to joinsubtext.com/lockedoncommanders. Also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with your local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Talks about Russell Wilson. Now we got to talk about Kirk Cousins. Adam Schefter of ESPN recently went on the Pat McAfee show and said, quote, I think Washington is going to be open to anything, including moving back in the draft. So there's going to be a team that doesn't get Kirk Cousins. And it certainly sounds like right now, Kirk Cousins will have as his primary two options, Atlanta and Minnesota. Maybe Washington jumps in. Maybe there's another team, end quote. So not exactly a firm report that the Washington Commanders are pursuing Kirk Cousins, but certainly there's a reason that Adam Schefter brings the team up in his conversation. Again, Atlanta and Minnesota, the most commonly rumored teams out there to be interested in Kirk Cousins. Chris Russell, our friend here at the show, radio host on Team 980, 106.7 The Fan, all that good stuff, also sent out a tweet on Monday evening that said, quote, one thing to keep in mind for a Kirk Cousins Commanders reunion as smoke continues to increase is this. As a caller reminded me on the Team 980, Kyle Shanahan, obviously very close with both Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. Kyle would love to work with Kirk again, but can't. Could he urge AP and DQ? End quote. I think it's a very good question brought up by Chris Russell there and that caller, whoever that was that called into Chris Russell. So kudos to you if you're listening to this and you were that caller. Look, you're making waves. You're reaching people, right? Relationships is what it's all about, right? And when you look at Dan Quinn and Russell Wilson, that's a relationship, right? Again, I know he's the defensive coordinator, he's the quarterback, but they work in the same building. They know who each other are. It's not like these guys are just completely devoid of contact from each other. Now, again, Pete Carroll would have a big part of that. And again, I don't know the inner dynamics of those Seattle Seahawks teams. So actually, it's possible if some of the rumors and some of the things that we've heard about Russell Wilson are true, that Dan Quinn's like, no, I know that guy. We're not going to go that direction. So if that's the case, then so be it. But again, I don't have that information, so I'm not just going to assume that information, right? But again, Kyle Shanahan wants to work with Kirk Cousins again, can't work with Kirk Cousins again, but says, hey, a buddy of mine, friend of a friend, you know what I mean, type of thing, could potentially make that work. Now, Schefter also said on the McAfee show that the market for Justin Fields, the Bears quarterback, hasn't been as robust as Fields himself or the Bears thought it would be. And still, Caleb Williams is very much expected to be the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft and be quarterback in the Chicago Bears this time next season. Now, because of this situation, the Chicago Bears might actually have to wait until the free agency quarterback pool is dipped into before finding a trade partner, find out where Kirk Cousins is going, find out where Justin Fields is going, and figure out who is basically on the outside looking in and find out where Baker Mayfield's going to end up and all those things, and then see who's left and kind of say, hey, like, listen, you were offering us X amount of draft capital. You're going to have to up that ante a little bit because we know that you need a quarterback. Spoke to Locked On Vikings host Luke Braun on Monday, and he feels like it's going to take a 3-year deal with some commitment to Kirk Cousins as the starter for most of that 3-year deal, if not all of it, for Kirk Cousins to sign. So is Washington willing to do that? I feel like that is honestly where this whole thing kind of blows up. I don't know that Washington is willing to do a 3-year deal with an older veteran quarterback, 1, maybe 2, those kinds of things, but I'm not sure that the 3-year deal makes a lot of sense for this team. Personally, I think Wilson's probably looking at a 1-year deal, probably going to get a prove-it deal. He may even be looking for a 1-year prove-it deal. get one chance, kind of show people he still got it, then go out there and make a good amount of money on a last deal in his career, trying to get some more rings and all those stuff. And because Russell Wilson also fits in with some of the things that Coach Quinn says he wants in a quarterback, I think in this scenario, I'm looking at the Washington Commanders more likely going after Russell Wilson than they do Kirk Cousins. Plus, he's not getting a massive deal, so it makes money sense as well. So it's Mock Draft Tuesday. So let's take a look at that. Whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Russell Wilson, doesn't really matter. You're kind of putting in, call it a placeholder, call it a bridge, even though 3 years, 2 years isn't really a bridge for Kirk Cousins situation. But a veteran quarterback comes in this offseason as a free agent. Now you got a mock draft around that. Charles Leno Jr. is not coming back. Logan Thomas isn't coming back. Nick Gates is reportedly going to leave after the beginning of the new league year. And we got the scouting combine under our belt. So we got a little bit more information. So let's hit the mock draft machine. Now, number 2 overall, we're going to stick it to the Broncos twice here. So we're going to bring Russell Wilson in, but we're also going to help the Minnesota Vikings, who did not get Kirk Cousins in my scenario. Here he goes to the Atlanta Falcons. Justin Fields ends up heading to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 3rd round pick in my mock simulation environment here. So the Falcons got a quarterback, the Bears got a quarterback, the Commanders got a quarterback. Now the Vikings and Broncos both need a quarterback, but both of them are sitting on the outside of the top 10. So both of them are trying to jump in. We're going to trade back with the Minnesota Vikings. And in this mock draft, and again, we're using value charts only, right? So we're not doing inflation. We're not doing quarterback inflations on that. We're just doing value charts. The Minnesota Vikings get the number 2 overall pick. The Washington Commanders get at least number 11, number 42, and Minnesota's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks in 2025. That is the price to jump from 12 to 2. And with that pick, the Minnesota Vikings take quarterback Drake May, who they expect to lead their franchise for the next 15 years or so. So by the time the Broncos get on the clock, they let go of Wilson. They don't get Cousins. They don't get Fields. They don't get Williams. They don't get May. They don't get Daniels. And J.J. McCarthy is coming off the board at number 11 because that's who I'm taking for the Washington Commanders. So you better hope that the Denver Broncos love some Bo Nix if you're a Broncos fan out there. So the Washington Commanders, they pick up Russell Wilson on the cheap as a free agent. They've got Sam Howell sitting in the wings to continue to develop. And now they draft J.J. McCarthy, the young kid out of Michigan, who did a really good job for himself at the NFL Scouting Combine. We're not done trading, however. We're going to then send numbers 40 and 42. So that's the Chicago Bears 2nd round pick and the Vikings 2nd round pick. We're sending both of those to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we're getting number 17 in the 1st round back, and we're getting number 152 in the 5th round, which we're not going to mock here, but we've got it in our back pocket, right? And then number 17, we take offensive tackle J.C. Latham out of Alabama. Yes, he was a right tackle in Alabama. He is itching to show the NFL that he can be a left tackle. Number 36, we're going edge Chop Robinson out of Penn State. 67, linebacker Junior Colson out of Michigan. So we're going to Michigan twice, which means we got to go Ohio State. Number 101, tight end Kate Stover out of the Ohio State Buckeyes program. PFF gives me an A. What do you give me? Let me know in the comment section or text me directly. Best case scenario here, Russell Wilson balls out. You have a great decision to make based on your assessment of McCarthy. You either let Wilson walk and you get a 3rd round comp pick in 2026 because McCarthy is ready, or you re-sign Wilson because Mark McCarthy either isn't ready or isn't fully ready. So you keep Wilson, and that's okay because dude is balling. He might be old, but he's balling, right? Worst case scenario, Wilson fails. Howell comes in at some point, fails. McCarthy comes in for the final 5 to 8 games or so, gets some really valuable reps, game work before 2025, and you probably got a high draft pick to spend to help your 2nd-year quarterback. But mine isn't the only veteran quarterback mock draft we're going to look at. We got another one coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Right now, the Boston Celtics are favored to win the NBA Finals altogether. They're favored out of the Eastern Conference. The Denver Nuggets are favored out of the Western Conference, but they have the 2nd best odds to win the NBA Finals. Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans is favored to go to the San Francisco 49ers. The Kansas City Chiefs are the 2nd best favorite, the top team out of the AFC, as they look for their 3rd straight Super Bowl win. Bet on all your favorite NBA players or teams, all your NFL futures with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Coming up today's episode of Locked On Commanders Mock Draft Tuesday, we're talking about a scenario here where the Washington Commanders sign a veteran quarterback, and I left it up to insiders. I said, pick Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins. It's up to you. I'm not going to tell you which way to go here. James sent in a mock draft where the Washington Commanders actually take Kirk Cousins as their next quarterback. I think a little bit of throwback to a better time is attached to that move as well. And James also has the Washington Commanders trading out of the number 2 pick. I think it's probably kind of a theme. If the Washington Commanders grab themselves a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, I think you probably expect them to then trade out of the number 2 spot. This one, the Washington Commanders trade out of number 2, and James says that he gets the Arizona Cardinals number 4, 27, and 66 picks in the NFL draft to move up from number 4 to number 2, and they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. Now, according to James, in this scenario, Washington basically is telling Arizona, if you want Marvin, you're going to have to pay for him, because guess what? We got a veteran quarterback. We got Terry McLaurin. Now we're going to go get us Marvin Harrison Jr. unless you pay enough to get him out of our hands. 4, 27, and 66 apparently was enough. And with number 4, the Washington Commanders probably make the Arizona Cardinals a little bit mad because they go tight end Brock Bowers out of Georgia. Kind of a slick move there. Number 27, another first-round pick. Offensive tackle Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, who had a pretty solid combine himself. So you get fifth-year options on both of those guys. Number 36, we're going edge Chop Robinson out of Penn State. I feel like that's going to be a very popular pick for most of the offseason until he starts to creep up into the first round of these mock draft simulators. Number 40 overall, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. I like that. Number 66, wide receiver Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina, who certainly made himself some money at the scouting combine. Number 67, offensive tackle Patrick Paul. Yes, brother to Chris Paul out of Houston coming in. And then number 101, running back Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville. So I know that James was watching the NFL scouting combine because Guerendo, I think it's projected as like 160th pick or so, but James takes him at 101. I don't hate it, believe me. So someone was watching the combine. So good class there. Very interesting mock draft. Now, before we get out of here, let's talk about post-June 1st cuts, right? This is something that a couple of insiders have asked me to talk about new. One insider asked me to talk about it again because I have talked about this before, but again, we're getting new listeners all the time, new people all the time, and who remembers every single thing that I say. I don't remember every single thing that I say, so I'm sure that you don't either. But this pertains specifically to a guy like, say, Nick Gates. So Nick Gates has been reportedly been notified he will be released by the Washington Commanders after the start of the new league year. Now, why not just release him now? Why wait until the start of the new league year? Well, most of the time, usually, so it's what I expect, but again, it's not finalized. You would expect that it's going to come with a post-June 1st designation, right? So Nick Gates, if he is cut before June 1st, he would save Washington a minimal amount of money, $333,000 according to Over the Cap. However, as a post-June 1st cut, he'll save the Washington Commanders $2 million. Now, they don't really need the money per se, but smart bookkeeping is smart bookkeeping. Take as much money as you can get, right? Cutting him pre-June 1st, all the money he's owed for. So when you look at Nick Gates' contract, he's got 2 years left, 2024, 2025. If you cut him pre-June 1st, then all of the guarantees, all of the prorated bonuses that he's owed come due in 2024. So his bonuses and prorated money for 2025 and all of his bonuses and guaranteed money in 2024 are all owed in 2024. So everything that he's guaranteed and all his bonuses are dead cap space. That's basically what happens there. If you make it a post-June 1st cut, then in 2024, you only account for his guarantees and prorated bonus money that were due in 2024. And then next year, you'll account for the rest of it. Since there's only one more year left, you account for 2025 in 2025, you account for 2024 in 2024. If Gates had a third year left on his deal. So let's say Nick Gates' contract was 24, 25, 26. A post-June 1st cut, the Commanders would account for his 2024 guarantees and prorated bonuses in 2024. Then the 2025 and 2026 prorated bonuses and all that money would be counted for in 2025. So that makes sense. If there was a pre-June 1st cut in 2024 and he had through 2026 on his contract, all of that money would then count in 2024. So that's the difference between a pre-June 1st cut, a post-June 1st cut. Now, a pre-June or a post-June 1st cut that happens at the beginning of the new league year, teams are allowed to do that to up to 2 players. So Nick Gates will be one, obviously, and then perhaps another one coming. I don't know that there will be another one, but they can do that to up to 2 players. Now, while that player is then free to go negotiate and sign with another team, the team has to still keep his contract money on their books for their salary cap up until June 2nd. On June 2nd, then Nick Gates' money would come off the books and free up that salary cap space. So if teams are in caps, situations where they're trying to free up money to sign free agents in the beginning of the free agency, doesn't really help them too much, and more so helps them sign their draft classes. Again, the Washington Commanders nearly $100 million in salary cap, so it's not like they're cash strapped. But again, good bookkeeping is still good bookkeeping, and you want to keep those habits going on. So hopefully that's a good explanation of post-June 1st cuts versus pre-June 1st cuts. Coming up tomorrow, combine winners. We're going to finalize our list for our spring scouting series that's coming up. Again, insiders, you will be getting the visuals on all our tape studies. If you're not an insider, you're fortunately, you're going to get the episodes. I'll describe them as best I can, describe some of the traits and everything that we're seeing. But again, licensing rules are licensing rules. We follow the rules here at Locked On, so I can't show them to you on these publicized videos and all those things. So we're going to come back for that. In the meantime, you got questions or comments, just throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Every day, thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.